Well, it is here, South Africa, with the announcement of the election date of May the 29th by President Cyril Ramaphosa and the date likely to be promulgated in the next few days. Well, it's full steam ahead for the elections and one of the biggest stories of this year, no doubt. Now, the 2024 elections coincide with South Africa's celebration of 30 years of freedom and democracy. The public broadcaster, of course, being there at the center of it all, capturing it for our myriad of audiences. And it is, of course, also mandated to deliver on this event as it has on so many others over the years. But we joined in studio now by SABC's Group Executive for News and Current Affairs Moshoeshoe Monare to talk to us a little bit about election season, our election rollout plans and the like. Mr. Monare, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So I think you saw my face. I get very excited around election season because it's something that I enjoy. And I think, you know, if you think of where we come from, this is also celebrating 30 years of democracy. The right to vote in this country was hard fought for. It was paid for in blood. And this is why it is such an important event. And the SABC, of course, integral to making sure that South Africans are not just educated, but are in the know in the lead up to an election.
Yeah, many thanks indeed. Look, you are right, especially given the fact that as a public broadcaster, we are still one source of news that is relied upon by millions of South Africans. You might have seen the recent study where it shows that the majority of South Africans still trust SABC. And we've got that constitutional mandate also to give expression to Section 16 of the Constitution, you know, to provide a platform for South Africans to express themselves, to make those kind of choices. So it's going to be a heavy responsibility on public broadcaster to really make sure that we are at the center of delivering credible coverage, fair, equitable coverage of elections, and also making sure that we give platform to diversity of views, diversity of voices, diversity of opinions, you know, to make sure that everyone is informed and can make that decisions. So in our planning, we take into consideration that unlike other media, we don't have any luxury to say this is going to be our focus or this is going to be you know, we can't be selective. We have to really be at the every village. We have to be at every town to make sure that South Africans can say we were fair, we were credible. And the advantage is the fact that unlike other competitors, we are the only media institution in South Africa in which our footprint is felt throughout South Africa. We are in every town in South Africa, and that's where we will really make sure that we give South Africans wall-to-wall coverage of 2024 elections.
And speaking to what you are saying, Mr. Monare, 39 million viewers across the 5 channels that we have at the SABC, 27 million listeners across the 19 radio stations, which is about 63% of the total radio listenership across the country. And, you know, 30 million digital impressions on our digital platforms. It speaks to the reach that you are referring to, but that also speaks to the sort of impact, the reach that the SABC has, but that makes it contested terrain. And as you can imagine, the calls have already started, asking for interviews. The parties are inundating us, and we have a responsibility because you also mentioned that we are trusted. And I must say, you speak about that very briefly, but it's no mean feat for the SABC to be the most trusted public entity, even ahead of SARS at this point. So there's a huge responsibility on our shoulders.
No, it is. It is huge responsibility. And you are right in terms of it's a contested terrain in a sense that everyone will expect that their voices need to be heard. And being a public broadcaster, and in some cases, you are expected to, you know, give platform to every voice, which to an extent it's a huge responsibility given the fact that it's for the first time you have a situation in which independent candidates are allowed to contest the general elections, which really is going to make our elections campaign very intense, very broad, and it's one of those things in our planning. We need to make sure that even though it's almost humanly impossible, but we need to really make sure that every voice is heard. And it's not just for us, but it's like what you're saying, that the reminder that millions of South Africans especially with the decline, the massive decline in other media, millions of South Africans see the public broadcaster as a source of credible information and news. So we are also waiting for ICASA, obviously, to announce their regulations, because other than our editorial policy, we still have to adhere to ICASA regulations. But it's going to be a tough one. But as per your introduction, we must never forget that also it's a celebration of 30 years of democracy since 1994.
So I would imagine, political parties, members, leaders looking on now, they are thinking about, coverage on the SABC, on the public broadcaster platforms, the various platforms we have. And of course, the law states that we should provide equitable coverage, not equal. But very often, this is some of the difficulty we run into, not just with the political parties, but with their supporters as well, who almost expect equal coverage for every party. And there are more than 300 registered with the IEC. We don't know how many will ultimately make it onto the ballot. But it's a huge and almost impossible task, just thinking of when people expect equal coverage.
Yeah. Look, in as much as we are expected to provide that fair and equitable coverage, but at the same time, remember, there are professional and ethical considerations where the editors and executive producers have to make those decisions. That's where the issue of editorial independence, that's the issue of, as per our tagline, independence and impartiality come across, in a sense that those decisions should not really be influenced by any person other than members of editorial staff. And it's one of the, we were lucky in a sense that, we got the board that really made commitment to support that editorial independence. We'll try our level best. We are obliged by our editorial policy to be fair. We are obliged by regulations to provide that equitable, given the fact that we are a public broadcaster. We are accountable to the South African public. So it's not about these political parties. It's about our responsibility and accountability to the South African public.
And speaking of, as part of our public service mandate, we are going to have a lot of first-time voters, young voters. And again, what's in store for them in that regard? And if I could tag onto that, perhaps looking at our coverage so far of various parties' election manifestos, perhaps an opportunity to share with the public, what the SABC's plan is in this regard.
Yeah. Look, the last census stats from State South Africa also revealed that, an average median age for South Africa is 27, which means we need to respond to a young audience. And the young audience come to us through social media platforms, through our digital platforms. That is why we are not just going to rely on our legacy linear platforms, but we'll make sure that we really reach them through those social platforms. You might have seen also with our coverage of major party manifestos that we really emphasize that we are not just a TV or radio organization, but we are a content creating platform. So that's where our responsibility is going to be, to make sure that we reach, we penetrate that youth market who, it has been shown even with the Morning Live that they, come through our platforms through social media.
And of course, just as a matter of clarity with the election manifestos, because people are watching and thinking, especially again, people from smaller parties, new parties, individuals who are now contesting, who are expecting coverage when they see the bigger parties being covered. Maybe we can just provide clarity on that in terms of the SABC.
Look, we will try. It's not going to be, I mean, you're spoken about 300 registered parties so far. Give and take, we are looking at perhaps, let's say 50 that can make through. With independent candidates. So that's where, in terms of our programming, without really revealing much, in terms of our programming, our programming, the thrust of our programming will be more town halls, more going to the communities, and that's where we will try to accommodate as many independent candidates, as many parties as we can, because that's where we're going to say, you have to face the nation. Here are the people that you want to convince to vote. We are giving you a platform. So it's going to be a tricky one, given the fact that you've got limited airtime, you've got limited platforms, but we will try our level best. So in our planning, we have taken that into consideration. We have several meetings with ICASA, with IEC, but also internally to say we need to make sure that the ordinary South African, the voter, is at the heart of our programming. And we are not going to be able to satisfy everyone, but we'll do our level best.
Well, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Moshoeshoe Monare, SABC Group Executive for News and Current Affairs, talking to us there about some of the SABC's plans, our vision for the coverage of these elections. But of course, we're not going to tell you about all our programs, but stay tuned because you will see the promos for them.